Thank you. Good to be here. And what a great funky space you have there. I absolutely love this space. It's fantastic. And hello to you who are home and decided not to get in your cars and come here. It's wonderful that you have this option. My pronouns are she and hers. My lineage is English, Irish, and German. And I'd like to acknowledge that we are on the Lenape tribal land. This is where Philadelphia is. And I'd like to just give credit to where credit is due, because we Americans have a habit of taking things as we want them, as you've noticed. So the title of my talk today is The Power of Fierce Love, and I want to bring to you an idea of love that isn't mushy. I don't want to bring to you the Hallmark card kind of conversation about love. But it's funny, I was a keynote down in Charleston, South Carolina, and at the CSL conference there, and the individual who's going before me, one of my colleagues, we were all supposed to talk on love, and she was doing the Hallmark card talk, and I was doing the non-Hallmark card talk. So we had fun being together, I followed her. Because my idea of love has not been born out of a lot of sweetness and rainbows and puppy dogs. My kind of love came out of a fierce fight for survival. Anybody know about that kind of love? The kind where you survived conditions that weren't lovely. The kind where home wasn't lovely. The kind where, things weren't just given to you and wasn't laid out for you. That's the path I had to follow to get to the kind of love that I experienced. And what I know is that there were many moments in my life when, thank you God, I had the presence of mind to listen to that tap on the shoulder. Because there was talk about dark night of the soul. There was one specific time, and I'll always tell you what is, okay? I had decided to divorce my husband, but we're still cohabitating. Okay, that's interesting anyway, right? So for a while. During that time, I became pregnant with another man's baby. So whatever you want to do in your mind with that, that's okay, because that'll be your experience of me, but it's governed by what you think and what you judge. That's the way it is. And there was a time it was hard. My two sons our elder sons were in the house. It was a hard time, as you could probably imagine. And there was one night I was on the sofa. I was there and I'm sobbing. I'm doing one of those ugly cries. You know, the snot coming out of your nose, ugly cries, right? And while I'm crying and just feeling like I had just totally ruined not only my life, but the lives of everybody I know, in that it wasn't quiet because I was sobbing, but in that moment, there was this little tiny voice that said I was worth saving. Do you know that voice? Because sometimes it's so low we don't hear it. We can easily miss that voice. But thank you God I followed that voice. Because it's that voice and it felt like Spirit had thrown an umbilical cord for a new life for me, and that umbilical cord was love. That's what it felt like. I want to tell you that my ex-husband and I are best friends, and he's coming to my house next week to help build a new deck. So whatever I did, I guess I didn't ruin it. I guess I stood in love. But he and I'm going to switch mics for a second. He and I definitely, we came up from a spiritual teacher together. And so we shared a conviction to love, and we shared a conviction to my sons, and a commitment that the mental, emotional health of our sons was more important than our squabbling. It was much more important. And so that's how, when you have something that's bigger than you, that's how you maintain it. For me, that's the power of love. But what doesn't work with when you want to be the place of love, and to me, the kind of place I want to be where you can feel me before I meet you. You know that feeling? Where somebody, you know when somebody walks in a room and they're a Debbie Downer, and you feel the room go, oh. And you don't like it, but your mind says, oh, I wish they weren't here. Yeah, come on, we all do that, right? But then there's also that person that walks in the room, you go, oh, and the room is bright. That's the person I want to be. I want to carry it with me. I want my consciousness to precede me before I open my mouth and before I engage. But what doesn't belong there, what can't coexist in that activity of mind is a habit of judgment. I cannot live being a judgmental individual and be this person that I want to be. Okay? And Bill mentioned, and it is true, I'm not cold now all of a sudden. All right. So when I'm judgmental, I'm shutting off. I'm keeping you at bay. Anybody who's ever taken any of my classes knows I begin the class with a commitment to non-judgment for weeks prior to the class. And the reason why I do that, it's not that we're all going to stop being judgmental. We're all judgmental. We're always going to be judgmental. It's what we do with it. It's why are we judging? What are we using it for? Are we using it to make ourselves bigger? Are we using it to make someone else smaller? Or are we using it to basically navigate life? And so, but what can't coexist in the place of love is a habit of judgmental, fault-finding, blaming. You're the reason why my life sucks. It can't coexist. Those are different energies. Those are completely different energies. And so do you guys here know the term chemicalization? Do you use that term? So if you don't know the word chemicalization is when you declare that you want to be something that you think you're not. Let's say it that way. That you decide you want to be a troubadour for peace. And then all hell breaks loose in your life. And you're arguing with your people and you find yourself angry. But and people often think that, oh, it's not working. As soon as the proverbial stuff hits the fan, you think it's not working. That's not what's happening. What's happening actually is that the stuff that does not reflect you being peace must be shed. It must be released. So you can imagine, since I want to be a walking, talking, breathing representation of love, what I've had to go through and what I've had to shed to stand in the nakedness of that fierce love. And a lot of it just had to do with self-judgment. So, excuse me. So what I find that a lot of people, when they come to this teaching, and even after they're in the teaching, do me a favor, take your hands, put your hands together kind of tightly, and so that there's no spaces between your fingers, put your hands up in front of your eyes and try to see me. Right? Doesn't work, does it? So you can put your hands down for a moment. So what happens is when we're clogged with judgment, fault-finding, blaming, thinking you're the reason why my life sucks, you're the reason why my life is hard, the politicians and all of that activity, all the blaming we do. And so it's so tight that there's no room for spirit to give and receive. There's no room for the flow of God. There's no room for the flow of love. So what is in the way there has everything to do, and I just gave my new friend here a copy of my book, and what we have to do there is the practice of forgiveness, is the practice of getting to know oneself, is the practice of non-judgment. So when we begin to loosen our hold, now if you do this with your hands again, and you try to look at me through your hands, you see something. It's still a little broken up, but you see something. This is when the filter is clogged with all of the human judgments and elements and patterns and conditioning and domestication. This is when we begin to let it flow. You see that? In order to be the place of love, we have to invite Spirit to have its way with us. Because if you and I are standing in a foundation of love, healing happens all around you, whether you know it or not. When you and I, it's one of the things I love about people who are practicing science of mind, that I love about metaphysicians. Not everybody's doing the deeper work, but it's our commitment to walk in that direction. What happens is that we are in the presence of each other's healing energy. Especially because what happens is that if I know myself well enough and I'm practicing non-judgment, and I'm gonna bring in quantum physics for the moment, but not really, because quantum physics, I'm told physicists and the scientists, they hate when we metaphysicians grab hold of their stuff and use it to explain what we believe. But here's what you and I know. They are now learning what we have known for centuries. They're now trying to figure it out. They needed science. I didn't need the science. I have had deep and profound faith my entire life that there was a greater possibility. Let them have their fun. But they've given us some language that allows us now to communicate with the secular world with a whole new category of people. So, okay, that's fine. So this is what I know. If I am walking in a judgmental, upset, blaming activity, then that's the way I see the world. And I think it's you. And then if I don't catch that it's me, then I begin to co-create it. And if you buy into what I see about you, you don't know that you're not it. I know that sounded like gibberish, but did you catch that? Our observation, this is quantum physics, our observation causes our world. But what are we observing the world from? What are we observing it from? Because if we're not observing the world from a place of acceptance and compassion and peace and just inner knowing, then how can we elicit it from another? My husband pulled up to, I'm one of those people, anybody else do this? Pull up to your house in your car and you sit in your car, sometimes for like a long period of time. It used to be that because I didn't want to go in. My older kids were crazy. But now it's just, there's a peace in the car. And so I can often be found, if you come by my neighborhood, napping in my car, reading, doing my emails in my car. Why? I have no idea, but I enjoy it. But he pulled up this day, and he pulled up next to me, and he looked at me, and he said, "You okay?" I went, "No." I had done a little bit too much social media that day. And I was so, I allowed, catch my language, I allowed my attention to be caught by the upset, the discord, the pain, the suffering, the wars, the famines, I allowed my attention to be caught, and I was sitting there in this empathetic moment of complete pain, and he could see it on my face. Now, while I am present to the world, and I am, because for 23 years while I had my pulpit, I was always that speaker who would talk about the down and dirty, the underbelly, because I don't want to be conscious I don't want to try to be a conscious person while being unconscious to humanity. So I will talk about abuse, and I will talk about things like sex trafficking. Why? Because while you and I are having a fun, good time, guess what's going on behind the scenes? Sometimes in the neighborhood or the house right next to us, sometimes in the bedroom next to us. So it's important that we be conscious to the plight of humanity and to the pain and suffering, because that is another, choosing to be awake to it is another force, another expression of fierce love. Because in order to be in that, you have to be committed to see the ugly, but not be the ugly. Right? To see the ugly without being part of the ugly. And so it was, but that day I was caught off guard. I guess my sensors weren't up enough. And it caught my attention. But in truth, with who we are being and how we choose to observe, we then are encouraging others to shed the limitations, to shed the judgments, to shed the pain, because it does take inner work. And that's, I mean, I always think that New Thought, and we're still smaller than we want to be, and I think it's because we are always asking people to take responsibility. Responsibility is a tough thing, but I always make the distinction, both in my classes and all my talks, that responsibility is not blame. Responsibility is saying, I know where I am in the creation of this. I know who I am in this. And when I take responsibility, I'm also taking the opportunity to create and recreate. Because we're not at the mercy of what was. We're not at the mercy of conditions. We're not at the mercy of this political climate. We're not. And it's imperative that we remember that we're not, because then we will act accordingly. Then we will act accordingly. But love, again, not just rainbows and bunnies and stuff, but that's great. I too have 3 grandchildren. That's so sweet. 3 granddaughters you said, right? And I got a text right before I came up that my almost 3-year-old is now wearing panties and out of diapers. Yeah. It must have just happened because I had her the other day. I probably changed one of her last diapers. But what a privilege that is. But you see, to me, who I am being with them, who we are being with our children, who has children here, okay, grandchildren. We have a responsibility. We have a responsibility to model what love looks like, not acceptance, not forcing someone to be what they don't want to be, even if you don't agree, even if you don't like what they're doing. That our ability to accept them as they are is another form of love. So love is powerful in so many ways. Love had Mahatma Gandhi survive and get freedom from the British rule. Nelson Mandela, was it 37 years in prison? 37, I think, right? And he did not come out angry. Viktor Frankl survived the death camps, but he didn't come out angry. And in my assessment, my opinion, which is worth nothing other than what you make of it, is that there had to be a commitment to a deep, deep presence of love that would allow someone to survive those conditions. You have probably survived conditions that you thought you could not. Anybody ever do that? Come through a real rough time, come through a divorce, come through getting fired, all those things that happen. That if we turn our attention from what we think is wrong to what we know is right, then we carry that with us. So I ask you, are you walking around in the skin of love? My spiritual teacher, who has been gone for many years now, she was little. She was 4'11" on one side and 5'1" on the other due to a bicycle accident. It was before the days of being able to get those kind of surgeries. But you didn't see her limp. She had a limp, but you didn't always see it. And she did ballroom dancing, and she would float. And you never saw the limp when she was dancing. You didn't even remember. I mean, I remember because I knew her from when I was knee-high to a grasshopper. but you didn't even really know that she had a limitation, because she was so the presence of love. She would look at you and melt your heart before you could count to 3. Imagine if we walked in that skin of that kind of love, in that consciousness all the time, how things would immediately change. But there are behaviors that would have to leave. What has to go is your judgment. What has to go is yours. Now, and I want to say, I'm not creating the whole distinction now between judgment and discernment. You made a judgment call to wear the clothes you're wearing today. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about when we lean on that because we need to find fault, when we need to feel better about ourselves. How much time do I have? Okay, good. No, I gotta, no time. Thank you, that's what I asked for. I want that. I can't force it, but I want that to be the skin I walk in, to be the consciousness I walk in. I want you to see that I'm the presence of love before you even know my name. That's what I want to do. And I'm pretty clear. I know that there's been experiences. I can't point them out to you particularly right now, but I know that I have removed my judgment from people and situations so completely that healing has happened. I know that that's happened. And it's happened because I cleaned my filter, because I did my forgiveness work, because I did my shadow work, because I let go of judgment. I let go of needing you to be what you're not. And then, in that moment, I was able to be in the flow of God. So, I'd like to pray us out, if that's okay. And those of you who are close enough, if you want to hold hands, that's great. Because it's great to feel the vibration of connection. And as I declare this word, I do so knowing that there is a power, a presence of love, an ever-flowing ebb and flow of spirit that shall have its way with us to the degree that you and I accept it, that you and I allow it. I know for each individual here now or listening to this at another time, that love has its way. And as we accept it and allow it, and we speak a yes to that invitation, it does tap us on the shoulder, and sometimes it hits us up on the side of the head with a 2x4. But it is all different forms of love. So if you and I are willing, if we're willing to be more loved than we've ever been, we just speak a yes, a silent yes, a covenant within ourselves. And everything in our mind and heart will align. I trust that this is so. I trust that it's for everyone. And with great faith and conviction, I do surrender this word, and I allow it to be so as I release it to love, to law, and to the awe of life itself. And so it is. So it is. Thank you.